Today, I want to talk to you about a very important case that happened in New York City that was decided early this week. It is the case of Daniel Penny. Now, this Daniel Penny case seems to have America in some sort of an uproar because depending on who you talk to, folks are deeply divided. Some say Daniel Penny is a hero who stood up and protected the people of the F train against someone who was threatening violence against the passengers and was clearly under the influence of some sort of drugs and psychotic. Other people will tell you this was an act of racially motivated vigilante justice. So, who is Daniel Penny? He's a 26-year-old Marine Corps veteran who, back in May of 2023, was on his way home from the gym when Jordan Neely, a 30-year-old homeless man, stood up and started threatening the passengers of the F train. He said that he did not care what happened, he was looking for food, and that he would kill an MFer, pardon the language, and he was ready to go back to Rikers. Before I get into it even more about why I believe that this case is important, I want you to hear Daniel Penny's words himself, as well as someone who was on the F train that fateful day, and then we'll talk about it. But first, I want you to look at this footage.
East Village in Manhattan, so I take the subway multiple times a day. In this instance, I was coming from school. I got out of class around 2:15. And I took I was at J Street Metro Tech, took the Uptown F train. At 2nd Avenue, a man came on, stumbled on, appeared to be on drugs. The doors closed and he ripped his jacket off and threw it at the people sitting down to my left. I was listening to music at the time and he was yelling, so I took my headphones out to hear what he was yelling. And the three main threats that he repeated over and over was, "I'm gonna kill you, I'm prepared to go to jail for life, and I'm willing to die." You know, this was a scary situation, and Mr. Neely came on. He was threatening. I'm 6'2", and he was taller than me, so it was. And there's a common misconception that Marines don't get scared. We're actually taught one of our core values is courage, and courage is not the absence of fear, but how you handle fear. And you know, I was scared for myself, but I looked around, I saw women and children. He was yelling in their faces, saying these threats. I couldn't just sit still. Some people say that I was holding on to Mr. Neely for 15 minutes. This is not true. I mean, between stops is only a couple minutes. So the whole interaction lasted less than 5 minutes. Some people say I was trying to choke him to death, which is also not true. I was trying to restrain him. You can see in the video, there's a clear rise and fall of his chest, indicating that he's breathing. I'm trying to restrain him from him being able to carry out the threats. And then some people say that this was about race, which is absolutely ridiculous. I didn't see a black man threatening passengers. I saw a man threatening passengers, a lot of whom were people of color. The man who helped restrain Mr. Neely was a person of color. And then a few days after the incident, I read in the papers that a woman of color came out and called me a hero. I don't believe that I'm a hero, but she was one of those people that I was trying to protect. We were all scared. Mr. Neely was yelling in these passengers' faces, and they looked terrified. The reason why there was no video at the start of the altercation was because people were too afraid getting away from him, and the videos didn't start until they saw that situation was under control. I knew I had to act. And I acted in a way that would protect the other passengers, protect myself, and protect Mr. Neely. I used this hole to restrain him, and I did this by leaving my hand on top of his head to control his body. You can see in the video there's a clear rise and fall of his chest, indicating that he was still breathing. And I'm calibrating my grip based on the force that he's exerting. And I was trying to keep him on the ground until the police came. I was praying that the police would come and take this situation over. I didn't want to be put in that situation, but I couldn't just sit still and let him carry out these threats.
Why? This young lady's right here.
Yeah.
Okay, what did you see?
What did I see? I was sitting over there. I heard the young man that's on the floor saying, hey, I'm willing to die, I'll do anything. I'm willing to die. I'll go to jail. I don't care. I don't care. And he was saying it so loud that everyone turned around. So this young man, he got belligerent and he tackled him down. The one that just passed away in the brown jacket, the one that just went past.
Now, the charges against Mr. Penny were very serious. The first one of second-degree manslaughter, which would have carried with it a penalty of 15 years in prison. The second of criminally negligent homicide, which would have carried with it a penalty of 4 years in prison if he were convicted. Now, this past Friday, the jury dismissed the first charge of second-degree manslaughter. And on the second charge, they determined on Monday that there was not enough evidence to convict Mr. Penny of criminally negligent homicide, and so they dismissed the second charge and acquitted him. This is important because we are seeing a jury determine that a man is justified in taking actions to defend himself and the lives of others. And this should be celebrated. Now, I do not celebrate the death of an individual. I think it's very sad. But the intent behind Mr. Penny's actions was not to kill Jordan Neely. Jordan Neely was threatening violence against the passengers of the F train on that day. He was willing to kill someone if necessary. And Mr. Penny just jumped into action. And he was trying to subdue the threat without the use of violence that would have harmed Mr. Neely. He kept Mr. Neely in a chokehold for around 6 minutes. Now, some argue that it was 15 minutes. As you just saw, Mr. Penny said that was ridiculous because there was only a few stops, and each stop lasted about a couple of minutes. So there was no way that he could have kept Mr. Neely in a chokehold for around 15 minutes. But some people want to say, oh, this is a case of a white man committing an act of vigilante justice against a poor, homeless black man. Mr. Neely may have been homeless, and yes, he had a bad run of it. Apparently, his mother was murdered when he was a child, but he had been in and out of jail. He had 42 criminal offenses against him, 3 of which were assaults on women. This was not an innocent person who was just a victim of circumstance. He was also a paranoid schizophrenic. Now, someone could say, and I would agree with this, that the mental health system failed Mr. Neely, that he would be in this sort of circumstance to begin with. This man should have gotten mental help. But what was Mr. Penny supposed to do? Was he supposed to allow a man making violent threats against the passengers of the F train on that day to carry through with the threats? No. He stood up like any good man would and said, you're not going to do this, and was willing to put himself in harm's way to make sure that no one was harmed, and even tried to keep Jordan Neely alive. He was just trying to subdue the threat. So I am glad that the jury acquitted Mr. Penny of these charges. This is the justice system done right. I would hate to see a hero, someone who potentially saved people's lives, being charged with criminal action. And I went and watched the best footage I could find of the whole interaction. And you can see what Mr. Penny said was correct. He was adjusting his grip. There was a clear rise and fall of his chest. He wasn't trying to kill Mr. Neely. the way the Black Lives Matter activists want to say that he was. This was not an act of vigilante justice. This was a man standing up for the lives of the innocent that could have been harmed. And I am glad that this Manhattan jury saw things the right way. I am glad that no one was harmed. And it is sad to me that Mr. Neely died, but as I told you before, that was not the intention. This man was a paranoid schizophrenic who had synthetic marijuana in his system. So it is unclear whether Mr. Penny's actions were really the cause of death. And if you look up the effects of synthetic marijuana on the system, it may be the case that Mr. Neely's drug use, in fact, contributed to his death. This is not someone who was just trying to take the life of someone, and it was not racially motivated. Because as Mr. Penny said, a black man helped him subdue Mr. Neely in the first place. Do not let the mainstream media and these Black Lives Matter activists control your way of thinking and control the narrative. This was a good man standing up for the rights of others and potentially saving lives. This is what happens when people are silent and when police do not do their job. If police were on the scene quicker, who knows? Mr. Neely might not have died. And that body camera footage that I showed you in the first place should have served as evidence in the trial. I have questions. Why was that body camera footage not allowed as evidence? In fact, according to what I could find, there were over 40 passengers on that train who corroborated Mr. Penny's story, the fact that he was the hero and not someone just trying to take somebody else's life. This was not a racially motivated crime. And I am glad that Mr. Penny stood up and did the right thing. I am glad that the jury did not convict him. I am glad that we have men in this country who are willing to stand up and do the right thing, even if violence is necessary, and that the jury saw it that way. If you agree with me, do me a favor. Please like this video. Please share it so more people see it. And subscribe to my channel for more content.